because your work involves so much decision making, there's only a limit to how much decision making your mind can do. So you start experiencing decision fatigue. What is known as decision fatigue? It's just like you're tired of just taking decisions, right? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges as a recreational athlete is, especially if you're a triathlete, because now you have to take decisions for 3 different sports. And always keep working on your skills. No matter how good an athlete you are, how competent, how experienced you are, there is always scope for improvement in skills. So it's not like you only do something in the beginning. It is all the more important in the beginning, but its importance sort of stays through your entire journey as an athlete.
Honesty, conviction, persistence, and progression. These are the words that come to my mind when I think of this person. I am proud to call him a friend, although he is much younger and wiser than me. I am delighted to see his progression and growth over the years. He is one of those annoying friends who turn out to be extremely good at whatever they do. He started out as a cyclist, picked up running, then he participated in triathlons. He is extremely good at all of these. But at least for now, it is in his running that he seemed to have found a footing and grown from strength to strength as an athlete and as a coach. He quit his well-paying IT consultancy job and started an organization that aligned with his passion for multiple sports and called it Athloft Multisport, a coaching firm providing coaching services in running, cycling, and triathlon. His name is Anubhav Karmakar. Welcome to the Working Athlete Podcast, Anubhav. It's a pleasure having you here on the show.
Thanks for that introduction, Venki. That's the finest introduction I've received so far, and it's absolutely my privilege to be on this. You've always been an inspiration, and it's great to see you doing this, and it's totally my privilege.
Thank you. So, do you want to share what Athloft stands for and what is its philosophy?
Yeah, Athloft, it started off with the idea in mind is to create an ecosystem for recreational athletes in India. And, I was involved in multiple endurance sports, triathlons, cycling, running. And since I saw that there is a need for guidance for recreational athletes since they are juggling so many different responsibilities, right? So they need that guidance which allows them to enjoy the sport, but at the same time progress in it, be happy in the sport. So my idea was to create an ecosystem which will support those goals, right? It could be performance goals, not just performance goals. Performance along with maintaining a healthy relationship with the sport itself, right? Which is what I felt was sometimes goes out of balance. So that's the objective of Athloft. So whether it be cyclists, runners, or triathletes, or any other endurance sports that we might find interest in, the idea is to sort of understand the sport, understand the principles of the sport, try and chaff out all the gimmicks which are there and things which are myths which are there, right? And give them the guidance which helps them navigate through a rather challenging sport like running and cycling.
That's that kind of aligns very much with the goal of this podcast itself. Kind of demystifying the sport for working athletes, and that's why I think it's great to have you as a guest on the show.
Yeah, and that's why I'm excited, because this is precisely aligning with the objective that I or rather the path that I had set myself upon.
So all your working athletes listening and watching this, if you need guidance on any of these, please feel free to reach out to him at athloft.com, athloft.com. That's correct, right?
That's right.
Awesome. So Of all the multiple sports, it is with cycling, right, that you started. How?
Yeah,
What made you pick up a bike?
I think I was not very sure, but I think it was, I think, adventure. The initial idea was, adventure. Um, I was, I mean, at certain point, I was obese. I was unfit, right? And I found that uh, by keeping myself fit, I'm able to function better, right? Both mentally and physically. And I was initially, I think I gained fitness through, going to the gym, right? But slowly I started feeling the need to do something different. I was sensing that it's a little unsustainable to keep going to the gym all by yourself and, repeat the same activity over and over again. And I guess, uh, I mean, cycling is something that we've all done as kids. Most of us have done as kids. So you do have some sense of, what sort of happiness it gives you. So I think it was through that, that I was inclined in, to get myself a bicycle. And I think somewhere I must have seen, while surfing through the internet, I saw something about mountain biking in Himalayas, right? And I think that sort of triggered the thought that I saw the bikes there, and they were pretty fancy looking bikes, uh, the fact that you can go over rugged terrain on the bikes, not just the looks, but that allows you to go through the rugged terrain. And then I started inquiring about those bikes, found out they're pretty expensive. What I thought was really expensive back then, but so a little skeptical. But then I started doing the research, being the geek that I've always been about these kind of things. And then I quickly realized that, world over people are using these kind of bikes. It's not just, a fancy looking bike. It has its functionality. It lends itself to certain things which a normal bike or a commuter bike will not allow you to do. And it just looked like a whole lot of fun. And I saw people from different parts of the world coming up for this event. So yeah, I was just naturally inclined towards it, and I think that's how it started. I bought the mountain bike, but for the longest time I was just riding on roads. I bought a mountain bike, but I was riding on city roads. I started joining the weekend rides which used to happen in Hyderabad. I was lucky enough to find cycling mates with whom I would go on these weekend rides out into the outskirts, into the farmlands. First few experiences of having punctures and fixing them, and I think, yeah, and that relationship, that joyful relationship with cycling started off.
Nice. So you mentioned that you were obese. Looking at you now, it is hard to imagine that. So how? What was your highest weight?
I think I was 78 back. Yeah,
Okay.
I think at my highest I must have been 78.
What is
I'm
it
not sure
now?
if it was the highest. It was at the point at which I thought I must reduce weight that I really measured it. I was not measuring until then. So yeah, and that's
What is it
the
now?
last measured high weight. I think now I probably hang around 53, 54.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's a good 25 kilos off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So you picked up the bike, mountain bike, and started riding in Hyderabad. And this event, MTB Himalaya, was your inspiration. And
Right.
after riding, did you manage to participate in that?
Yeah, so obviously I had made up my mind that I wanted to do it. It was the reason why I bought the bike, right? And I did sign up and landed up there at the Himalayas. Had something else in mind, and of course it turned out to be a completely different story.
Okay. When was this?
This was 2013, I think, end of 2013.
Okay. You did that MTB Himalaya in end of 2013. But when did you pick up the bike?
Right. I must have picked it up. I think early March, March 2013, March
Okay.
of April. Yeah, you could say just about like mid-year, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, somewhere. I don't remember specifically, but somewhere around March and June, so one
Hmm.
of those months.
Hmm. So
Yeah, but I didn't specifically train for it because back then I didn't know anything about training really.
yeah.
was just riding on weekends. Yeah.
Mhm. So you said you thought that the event would be something, but it turned out to be something else. What was it? How was the experience?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I realized that when you do something like this, you need to train for it. You just can't show up, right? So obviously, of course, I had fitness, right? But I realized I lacking in skills, right? Especially when you're going downhill, right?
Yeah.
Completely lacking in confidence and things like that. And I mean, it's not like you can't finish the event, but it's just like others are moving much faster, and I've always been a little performance oriented and things like that. And then I'm like, I was going really fast up the hills, and then I was losing position as I went down the hill, right? And other thing is, I didn't know how to even handle the bike downhill. So my palms were paining a lot because I probably was holding them too tight. Also, probably, I had not taken care of the bike. The shock absorbers gave up middle of the tour. So obviously, I had not, gone to a bike shop and, got it serviced. And I still had not developed, that sort of knowledge base in terms of, what is the level of preparedness you need as an athlete and also your machine, right? So a lot of that learning, and also like I had a couple of really bad falls and I almost fell off the hill once. So I mean, I enjoyed it, but at the same time, I the learning experience is that you need to train for something which, even though it looks adventurous and it looks simple, but you need to find out more about it and then figure whether it's something that you can just show up for or not. And so what I figured is that since I live on a flat land, like I was living in Hyderabad back then, and there was very little scope for training for mountain bike events. I think that time I took a decision that I'm going to stick to what I can train for, right? And I still commit to that. So I still feel very, very tempted to do a lot of different things, right? I mean, that's how my journey started, and of course that nature is still there with me. Like I want to explore more, try out different type of sports, but at this point of time I've sort of understood that what, I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and there's a scope to sort of do something consistently, right,
Yeah.
without too much of discrepancy, and not too much of vagaries of whether this facility will be available or not, or whether I'll be able to train for something within this phase or not. So that's, I think, that mindset started coming in, wherein you need to sort of sometimes focus. But having said that, I think 2014 I was still not as focused as I am today, because I was still trying out
Yeah.
different things.
Yeah.
I had still not ventured into a lot of sports which I ended up after 2014.
Yeah. So in 2014, I think the first time I saw you was at the start of TFN 2014. I saw this dude.
Right.
I saw this dude who landed up in Bangalore airport, and I think landed up at the start, but something was missing. I think you.
Right. That was,
I think your bike did not arrive, right?
yeah. So that's a completely bizarre story. So thing is, as I said, right, 2013 end, I decided, okay, I'm going to go with road bike, and I bought a second-hand road bike. That road bike was not my size. So again, lack of knowledge, right? Lack of guidance, right? Ended up buying a bicycle which was a good steal, because I bought a second-hand bike. It was a good price bike, so I immediately went for it. I didn't know anything about components and stuff like that, and so I rode a bike which was not suited for me for a significant amount of time. But just before TFN, I happened to go to Switzerland for work,
Right.
right? And there, by this time, I already have enough knowledge. It's just that I was not buying a bike, I think probably because of the expense that I had just made on this other bike. That's also another lesson, that if you have made a mistake, you need to rectify it, because your physical well-being and your enjoyment of the sport is more important, right?
Yeah.
So, but anyways, that opportunity was there, I think, to buy a bike which I absolutely loved. It was a custom made bike from Switzerland, and it was very difficult to lay my hands on it. Actually, it was quite a bit of a challenge. So finally, things worked out, and I was able to lay my hands on it. And then on the way back to India, the bike got lost, right?
Right.
And I was And the thing is, I was supposed to arrive a few days before, but then something happened at work and I had to extend my stay there by a couple of days, which meant that I landed in Hyderabad and almost immediately took another flight, within a day to Bangalore.
Bangalore. Yeah.
But I thought, that's fine. I was still fairly young and energetic and, willing to handle these kind of things. But the problem is, once I landed at the Hyderabad airport, there was no bike, right?
Right.
And I was shocked that something as large as a bike can go missing, right? So I had no choice but to pick up the old bike. So I was like, I was so excited about riding the new bike because it felt so much smoother. It was just the right size. And to know that, oh, I have to ride such a challenging tour on, something which doesn't fit me well was a bummer. And then what happened is, of course, I think, okay, something's better than nothing. But I realized that, I was using a different set of cleats in Switzerland, right? But it didn't strike me, in the whole mix up that I was having another set of pedals, a different system of pedals on the other bike. So right at the start line, I just tried to clip in, I realized, oh, now
Right.
it was just like the worst day of my life that I was having, at the start line. So I rode from Bangalore to Mysore, on a pedal, which was my leg kept slipping. So it was a horrible day. And since it was just the first day and we still had a long, tour ahead, not a great way to start because you're only more taxed, right? But thankfully, thanks to Crankmeister, they were able to sort of arrange for, the right pedals, and,
Pedals. Yeah.
the rest of the tour went fairly better. I mean, I wouldn't say it was a perfect tour, but yeah, fairly better.
Yeah. So that was the first time I saw you, I think. Or
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and he's this tiny looking energetic young man, and flying up the climbs, and it was very good to see. I think we ended up riding together on the way to Munnar or something. I might be
Right.
having the pic of us all together, and 2014 was one of the toughest tours. Of there were.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was in my books. It is the toughest I have done. I have done what
Well,
nine. Yeah.
I probably got a bang for my buck then.
Absolutely, absolutely. Remember?
But I remember because going up Kalhati, I had a bad experience. Like I cramped and I fell,
Yeah.
and I swore that day that I'm going to come back here. And that's another story because I think the next time I went to Kalhati after that time, again I was with the Spectrum Racing team, right? And you were also there, and I managed to get the KOM that. So it was like sweet revenge for me. But I still remember vividly that how. I think it's partly due to the bike, right? I mean, I think I should have been able to complete the climb at least. There's fairly enough good fitness, but I think the bike not being in shape, not being the right size, I had a horrible experience of Kalati. But overall, I just enjoyed the tour. I still remember all the scenic routes. It was great
Yeah.
fun,
Yeah.
especially being with a good bunch of cyclists. I think that sort of. I think the reason why I signed up was, of course, to have an adventure, but I think I learned a lot from the tour. I also fell in love with cycling a little more.
Yeah. So you mentioned. I mean, it's very hard to not fall in love with cycling when you are riding in such a setting, right? And also when you are taken
Yeah,
care of, every need of you is taken care of, and just have to focus on riding. Uh, But
right.
you mentioned that you fell on Kalahati. What was
Right.
that about? What happened there?
I mean, of course, I think it's a mix of inexperience, could be a little bit of over enthusiasm, and I also think not having the right bike, a bike which is a little bigger than your
Yeah.
size, going up the hardest climb in India, arguably the hardest climb in India is not really, can be a recipe for disaster. Yeah.
It is.
So I think, yeah, that's what I mean. I think, muscles cramp for multiple reasons. And one of the reasons is when you push it too hard. it's not capable of handling that intensity. So I was going fairly hard because I loved climbing and I wanted to do well on Kalati. So I
Hmm.
wasn't taking it easy really.
Hmm.
So, but I guess somewhere after, I think it happened on the Hail Hitler section, which is a rather
Right.
challenging section. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, I rode till I could stay on the bike. I mean, eventually I cramped and to the point where I couldn't go any further. Yeah. I
Wow.
don't think so. I've had that sort of an experience
Yeah,
after
version.
that day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That section you are talking about is just 300 meters of 15% or so. It feels like 3 kilometers. Just making it up
Yeah.
there is horrible. And yeah, I think when when it is so steep, it is even difficult to keep the bike down, the front wheel down. And
Right.
so if you are struggling and cramping, it is very easy to just fall off. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you managed to go later and take the KOM. When was this? That
I think this was just probably within a year, I think.
right,
I think,
2015, I think.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, 2015 somewhere. I don't remember the month. If you can
Mm,
recall when did we make the trip?
yeah.
But I mean, I just wanted to do well. I mean, better than, I just wanted to finish well. But I was just surprised that, it was the fastest time back then. Today is a different story altogether.
Yeah, yeah. What do you remember? What was the time at the time? Yours?
No, it was definitely over an hour. I
Yeah.
don't remember exactly.
Now
But
it is
now I think
just
it's a
under
sub one
an
hour.
hour. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think fairly more than 1 hour. Yeah, but that was like, yeah, that's really long back, like 5 years back. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I,
Lot of strong guys went up that hill.
yeah, yeah,
KKR, Naveen John. I think
yeah,
KKR still, Kiran Kumar Raju still holds the K1 on that, I think.
yeah. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it must be him.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. So,
Need to go back there. Yeah,
I think another incident, another time I remember meeting you and racing with you was in Hyderabad. Was it 2014 race or 15 HPC race? So you
yeah.
were
It's difficult to
there.
recall.
Yeah, you were there. Uh, Gaurav Duggal was there. GD. Then Aman was there. Aman Punjani, and four of us were in a
Right,
breakaway. And
right.
four of us were in a breakaway, and you guys, obviously, three of you were training together and from uh, riding together in Hyderabad, and I came there from Bangalore, just
Yeah,
on a family trip, and borrowed a bike from a friend, I think Richard, and was racing there. And you guys tried really hard to drop me. That's why I still remember that.
I'm not
And
sure. If you're ahead of us, we would have, yeah, definitely tried.
so we were working together, and what struck me was that the way you as we came closer to the finish line, you gassed it, boom, and you were flying 50 km pace, boom, 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 and obviously the sprinter in the group, Duggal, took the win. And
Yeah,
I think
that's it.
I came second, and Aman finished third, and you were like,
Yeah,
fourth in the four guys because you went too
I
early.
think, yeah, I think if I can recall, it was still my old bike. So if it was my first bike, first road bike, then it's certainly 2014, I would say,
Okay.
because I think end of 2014 is when I had the much improved right fit bike. So I'm
Right.
guessing this is 2014.
So that's cycling. You had a great time cycling and doing all these events. When did you start running, though?
No, I started running, I think, again, mid of 2013, right?
Hmm.
So I think when I started riding, weekend rides, I think somewhere while riding, I met people who were also running.
Hmm.
And then I asked, okay, so how do you run and things like that? Like, do you have a similar sort of a setting like you have in cycling where, you groups go for weekend rides? And that's when they mentioned Hyderabad runners. So I looked them up on the website and I saw that, yeah, there is a run which is happening on one of those Sundays really, really early. And yeah, I had a pair of shoes laced up and landed up there. And I still remember, I think Richard was there and Romil was there and Shankar. And these were, back then I was not aware of who they are, but they were the front of the pack runners of Hyderabad runners. And I had no idea what I was getting into that day. But as it turned out, because I was inexperienced, right? I mean, that's what I was doing back then, hitting it out and trying out different things. And I was going faster than them. And then I was returning back to, sort of stay with them. And at some point, one of the runners was like, are you sure you're going to be able to hold this up for like 20 plus kilometers? And I was like, yeah, I'm feeling great. But that's as much as I knew about endurance, right? It didn't end well. I didn't finish that run. But thankfully there was support, from Hyderabad runners. There was a support car. So that's how I went back to the start line again. But yeah, you can call it my good luck or bad luck. I ended up meeting runners of pretty high caliber. I think all of them, Boston, so Richard today is a 2 hours, I think, 26-minute-ish runner, right? Really high caliber runners there. Romil finished, had qualified for Boston. But back then I had no idea. I had no idea that you can run 42 kilometers. So it was all like completely like, I had no knowledge or any sort of, I would say, inkling about what it, for me, it was like 42 kilometers. Or if I can run 5 kilometers, I might as well just extend the time and keep running until 42 kilometers, right? That's, I think that's probably what my mindset was like, right? But, and also the fact that, I would see people who are much older than me running 42, that surprised me though. That surprised me because, I was 26 at that point of time, but to see people who are in their 40s, who are in their late 30s, for me, them running 42 kilometers was a bit of a shocker. And I think my mentality does that if they can run, so can I. But I did not probably grasp the fact that they are training, and that training has an effect, that it's not just physical ability. That physical ability develops over time, and that endurance sports lends itself to, like keep improving with age, because you're of the mindset, like as you get older, your physical abilities reduce and you can't get better. You can probably just manage to get through. But that's my level of experience and knowledge back there. That's just how my first experience running was.
So was it on the Shankarpalli road? They used.
No, this was KBR.
KBR, okay.
We started KBR through Jubilee Hills.
So these the Hyderabad Bicycling Club back then and Hyderabad runners had quite a bit of overlap in terms of people that were part of both of them. So that I was looking to start running at that time as well, but never happened. But how was your first marathon experience? When was your first marathon to begin with?
I think that was August of 2013, and it was pretty much in the similar lines as all the other events that I mentioned. So I think I was ambitious, and I although there was some level of guidance, but I don't think so. I probably did not trust any of that guidance, or probably didn't take it too seriously, because it was not coming from any sort of an authority or a coach or something like that. It was just general internet thing, and I sort of felt like trusting my own instincts is better than trusting that. Anyways, I think I just cooked myself up in the first marathon, and I finished in like 5 hours 20 minutes. Right, an excruciating few last kilometers, probably because I think I was trained for the distance, but I had not paced it well.
Okay.
So yeah, all my initial lessons were learned the hard way. Yeah.
Where was this, your first marathon?
This was Hyderabad. So it was also a challenging course over the flyovers. It's one of the most challenging marathons in India.
Yeah, they call it the flyover marathon or something. They have a nickname for it, I think. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely a lot of elevation gain. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. The first that was your first marathon, 5 hour 20 minutes. Now imagine you doing something like that for 5 hours 20 minutes. You might end up doing 100 kilometers or something. But
No, I don't think so. I can keep running for 5 hours, 20 minutes right now. I don't think so. I have that patience anymore.
yeah. So, what was your first triathlon event?
First triathlon, I think, was Hyderabad triathlon. Yeah,
Okay.
lucky to have had like a city triathlon, but it was a pool swim though.
Hmm.
And I think I did the Olympic distance, which is, I mean, if the audience doesn't know, Olympic distance is 10 kilometers of swim. Sorry, it's a 10-kilometer run in the end. It's I think, a 1.5-kilometer swim, 40-kilometer bike ride, and a 10-kilometer run.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, in that order. Right.
Okay. So that was which year was this?
This was, I think, uh,
Around
I
2014
think
or
it's,
so that the Hyderabad
yeah,
runners
I
have
think
started this, I think, right? Yeah.
2000. No, I think they might have started earlier, but I think I did it in 2014,
Okay.
if I remember correctly. Yeah.
The swim is in the Gachibowli Stadium pool, and
Yeah, so
that's.
actually they have two different locations for
Mhm.
swim, but I think Olympic that year it happened in Gachibowli, but they split the participants to
Okay.
Gachibowli and I think one of the colleges there in IBS Hyderabad. So
Mhm.
because there are multiple distances formats, right? There's Olympic, there's half Iron, there's full Ironman. All so they are able to sort of split the participants across the pools.
Okay. Okay. So you love cycling and you fell in love with running as well, and the natural progression you saw as something is happening in triathlon. Let me try it. Uh, might have been
Right.
your mindset going by the trend of I want to try whatever is there.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yes.
yeah. So now you took it up to like Ironman 70.3 as well, right?
Right.
When was
Right.
this? How was the experience for training and racing
So
there?
I think the same event, Hyderabad Triathlon, the very next year I attempted the half Ironman,
Okay.
right? Because by then I was fairly good in, yeah, I think 2015 I was fairly well developed cyclist as well as a runner,
Hmm.
right? But I was very occasional swimmer. I never spent too much volume in swimming because I mean, that's primarily because I just didn't want to take time off cycling and running.
Yeah.
I enjoyed these two so much. I mean, that I just didn't feel like dedicating too much time for swimming. But anyways, again, the 2015 I think was the first half Iron triathlon, and I think I did multiple half triathlons that year. I probably did Thonnur, which is close by, right, from Bangalore,
Mhm.
and then Thonnur triathlon, and I think I did Hyderabad triathlon couple of years, 2015, 2016.
Okay. So I was about to ask if you have done anything outside the country. Any?
Yeah, so that's when because the experience in India as of now, as it stands, is still not like a completely uh, I would say fulfilling experience because of the limitations that we have from an infrastructure point of view. So Hyderabad triathlon is a pool, right? Whereas traditionally the half Ironman or the full Ironman happens with an open water swim, and
Correct.
Thornur gave me the first experience of open water swim. I had never been in an open water before that,
Mhm.
but it was still loops in a lake, right?
Mhm.
But I think the idea of doing the official half Ironman 70.3 event was something which excited me, and also the fact that the open water swims are generally in the ocean or in the sea, right? So I
Correct.
think that's also a big kick. So at the same time, I saw it as an opportunity to visit new places, right? And I think the first international triathlon I signed up was Vietnam. I'm not
Mhm.
sure it was 2016 or 17.
Mhm.
I think it was 2016. Uh, that was what I signed up for because it was fairly close by
Okay.
to home,
Yeah.
right? And right, but it was a challenging one considering it's still a humid place. But
Mm.
I think I enjoyed, the experience of swimming. I think that was what was my highlight there is to because I had never been ever before in a ocean or a sea without chest level, any water above chest level. I never
Okay.
ventured beyond that.
Yeah.
So for me, yeah, I mean, I remember like it was never, I was never so competitive about the swim part of it. For me, the race began after I came out of the ocean.
Right.
That's when I started clocking my time because I was strong on the bike, and that's how I always like I was fairly weak in the swim, and then I was always making up for it on the bike and then on the run.
Yeah.
So I did Vietnam, and then I think the year after that I did Turkey.
Okay.
And Turkey was an excellent experience because
Mhm.
I came close to sort of doing back then. I mean, finishing close to 5 hours or just under 5 hours was something which excited me. So because my swim had still not progressed because I was not doing volume or not focused towards the swim training. But my biking and running had significantly improved. And overall, the course in Turkey was lovely.
Right.
It was a beautiful experience. And again, I made Turkey is also a nice, a location to visit, right? So the whole idea was to sort of pack two things in.
Yeah.
And I think most of my races, when it came to traveling internationally for triathlons, were always, the excitement was also around sort of visiting new places,
Yeah.
which which has not been the case with, let's say, my running races or the bike races. Bike races were always the decision is based on who else is going or like how fun the race is, what kind of format is. But whereas triathlon is a lot more individualistic event, and since they happen in so many locations, all through the year, you have a lot to pick and choose from.
Right.
So for me, that was what Ironman 70.3 meant to me.
Awesome.
The thing is, I know how to ride, I know how to run, I can survive the ocean. So let's go for it.
Awesome. So, did you manage sub 5 in Turkey?
I finished 5 hours and 1 minute, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah. But I mean, for me, it was as good as anything under 5 hours. That has always been my mindset. I've never had that. When I say 5 hours, I want to get close to 5 hours. So
Yeah.
even with the whole sub 3 thing about marathons, I'm sure you must be knowing everything. Just everybody, there's a lot of hype about finishing under 3. I
Mm.
never had that, although I happened to do that at some point of time. But for me, it was just like whether it's 3 hours 1 minute or it's 2 hours 58 minutes. It's pretty much in the long scheme of things, it's pretty much the same. So I was very, very happy with the finish, although it was just over 5 hours. But I think I met my goals there. And the thing is, I finished really strong. So
Yeah.
I knew like I hadn't completely gassed out, and still with a weak swim finishing in 5 hours. So I was happy with the way I biked, happy with the way I run, and excellent memories from that race.
Yeah. That's a great point there. It does see. Although you maybe having a 5 hour target or sub 5 hour target, having finished 5 hour 1 minute or 5 hour 10 minutes or 5 hour 30 minutes doesn't take away the joy you had during the process of training or taking
Yeah,
part in that event, right? So it is
yeah.
still a win in that sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, of course, if you're a performance-oriented athlete, if you're aiming for 5 and you end up finishing 5 hours 30 minutes, of course there is some homework to do and figuring
Right.
out there's
Right.
something which is must have gone wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you're finishing like a couple of minutes or 5 minutes, if you're finishing 5 minutes, there are a few tweaks that you need to do. If you're finishing 1 minute, it's just probably because the terrain can make a difference, the weather can make a difference. So you need to tell before we start pushing too hard, like
Mm.
saying, oh, I'm going off my target pace, let me push hard. You need to also have the maturity to understand that probably the conditions are different, and especially in a triathlon, because you are going through a mix of stuff, right?
Mhm.
The sea could have been turbulent,
Yeah.
right? It could have been windy on the bike, right? You're running terrain. For example, Turkey was through a golf course, so the terrain keeps changing. You go through, golf courses are not necessarily flat, and
Yeah.
the surface also keeps changing. You go
Yeah.
through grass, you go through. So, I mean, I have never run in a golf course before
Yeah.
or after.
Yeah.
So what I specifically remember is not how much my run got affected, but I remember having fun on the golf course
Yeah.
and finishing fairly close to whatever I had in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to factor all that in, right? It's like, okay, if it's too much variation, then of course, if
You have
if
to
you've been a
go back
serious
to the,
athlete who's,
yeah,
yeah. But if it's a little bit, you can't beat yourself too much about it, because you have to remember that some of the fluctuation is going to come from the environmental factors.
yeah. So you have to, if you look at it and in a performance aspect, there would be things to analyze, but then you have to
Right.
look at it, and as a part of a journey process, there would be definitely things to take away in any
Yeah,
event. Yeah,
always.
yeah,
Always. That aspect remains, right?
yes,
I always keep saying that bad days are great days for, learning actually.
absolutely.
Uh, so, so definitely need to factor that in going forward.
Awesome. So at this point of time, you were doing all these, exploring all these sports, and you were still working full time, working consultant, I think, right? You
Yes,
were still a working
yes,
athlete at that point of time. So what were some
yes.
of the challenges you faced as a working athlete doing all these things?
Right. So I think, again, it depends, on uh, every working athlete, of course, is working in a different environment. But I was working in a fairly challenging environment where you're consulting, right? So hours are not really that predictable. Working
Mm,
hours are not standard, as
correct.
some you might be aware. So I was working on. So you have to travel abroad, right? For sometimes for supporting the team, and you were working with teams across the globe. So of course that did have an effect, because you need certain amount of discipline, right, in your life. And you're also I was fairly new. I was also on a learning curve when it comes to the job itself. What I would consider as a fairly challenging work environment that I was in. So you have a learning curve there. So you're mentally, I think what is more mental than physical actually, because
Mm-hmm.
your brain only has so much to scope to grasp, right? So you're in a new sport, plus you're adding up multiple sports. At that point of time I was exploring different things, right? So
Yeah.
your ability to learn, right, your ability to explore for how to go about training and things like that is very limited, right?
Okay.
Both in terms of time constraint. So I don't feel like carving out time for training was really the difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
That I was able to do fairly well, but I was not able to invest time into how to go about doing things and exploring things, because you know what, I've always honestly been a student of the sport. Like
Mm-hmm.
I probably find that more exciting than sometimes I go through these
Yeah.
phases where I'm more excited about learning about the sport than just going out and training. So
Mm.
that's part of my nature, and that's probably why I never had a coach, because I was like, I want to explore further myself, right?
Yeah.
And I think that factored into the decision of probably changing my career, because I figured that it's not just being an athlete that excites me. Being a student of the sport excites me.
Right.
And somehow, because the work that I was involved in, the organization I was working in was a very competitive organization, and they were performing at a very high level. The
Mm-hmm.
expectation was also that. So obviously, when that happens, you're mentally challenged in terms of uh, finding bandwidth to explore something which is also a whole knowledge area in itself, right? And that too, a knowledge area in cycling, running, swimming, triathlon in general. So that is what I felt like I'm being deprived of trying to do something which I enjoy doing. I enjoy studying the sport, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was a challenge, apart from the fact that there were certain situations which were also physically demanding. Like, for example, I remember one of the Mumbai Marathon races, we ran into some sort of an issue uh, at a very critical point in the project. And I was up until 4 a.m. at the hotel room, uh, even just like before going to the start line. So I had spent an entire night not sleeping, but I had no choice because I was already there for the race, and this it was not a planned situation. It just got extended, and you work in a team, it's not in your control all the time, right? So those
Right.
sort of factors were there, but I don't think so that contributed to my real challenges as an athlete. It was more of, for me personally, it was more of the fact that I always had this deep desire to explore the sport from a knowledge perspective.
Yeah.
So that was my challenge. But otherwise, I was able to fairly balance time, because even when I was traveling, I would always take my bike along, right? I would take the trouble of planning things out, or
Yeah.
either, buy a bike if I'm out there, if
Yeah.
I'm planning to buy a new bike. I would always figure out the running routes over there. So, and I always enjoyed the fact that, my job was taking me places and I was able to explore places on foot, running and cycling. So as such, I was enjoying the whole affair,
Yeah.
but the
Yeah.
only thing I think which was taking away from me is the time to explore
Mhm.
it as a student of the sport.
Okay. Okay. But knowing what you know now, as a coach who is working with so many working athletes and helping them with their performance and stuff, um, would you do something? Would you have done something differently if you were, coaching back the Anubhav back then?
Oh, of course, of course. I mean, by now I think everybody has realized that I could have done a lot of things differently, right? I think essentially, if I was to coach, I would have taken better decisions, right? It's a question of taking the right decisions, what to sign up for, what not to sign up for, what are you geared up for. Even if you go into the nitty gritties of training, whether I should have done that certain run, or whether I should have taken up so much volume, should I have signed up for a full marathon right away, or I should have done a half marathon. And I think the role of a coach is just that, is to not just, it's not just about telling the athlete what to do, what run to do, or to set up a plan and analyze the completed workout. That's just a very minuscule part of the job. A big part of the job is to take decisions based on what you're observing, take decisions not only from data, but what you are hearing back from the athlete, right? To communicate with the athlete. So I think that's one of the challenges of being self-coached, is that you don't have anybody to sort of reflect on things with.
Bounce
You don't
your
have
ideas.
like a, yeah, to bounce your ideas. You don't have a sounding board. And so sometimes your decisions are biased, right? You are obviously, as an athlete, want to perform well, so you're always trying to push hard, and there's no one to tell you that, okay, you probably need to take a step back, because taking a step back in endurance sports is very important,
Right.
right? Knowing when to take a step back and how much. So that becomes a challenge as a self coached athlete. And sometimes, because your work involves so much decision making, there's only a limit to how much decision making your mind can do. So you start experiencing decision fatigue. What is known as decision fatigue? It's just like you're tired of just taking decisions,
Right.
right? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges as a recreational athlete, is especially if you're a triathlete, because now you have to take decisions for 3 different sports.
Yeah.
And it's not the juggling between, you get into the groove. Once you set into triathlon training, you get into the groove of managing 3 different sports. It's about taking decisions in every 3 different sport, right?
Yeah.
Of course, as a recreational athlete, the fact that you have only very little volume in each sport, so progression sometimes can be limited, right? But irrespective of that, how much less volume you're putting in, your decision making is still very complex, because your fatigue is coming from, stress is coming from 3 different sports.
Right.
So I think managing that becomes a little complex.
Yeah. I think the mental aspect of it, the decision fatigue that you mentioned, is really big, really a big factor for working athletes. So they are making
Right.
decisions at work. They are spending so many hours at work, and they have to do that same thing towards the sport. That, and you know, it can be one sport, two sports, or three sports, or whatever amount of sports that they are taking it. But if they have to if they have the time and the energy and the resources to do the research and spend the time, then it is fine. But even then, there is that mental energy that they are expending, right? So that decision
Correct.
fatigue that you mentioned, I think is very critical.
Yeah.
And that's where,
Yeah, because I have worked.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, that's where people like you coaching them would come in very handy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have worked with athletes, continue to work with athletes who are very well read. They delve into all of this. They're also just like me, students of the sport. They love reading about everything, about the sport and how to go train better and things like that. And I encourage them to do that. But I think the gap really is, connecting that knowledge to practice, right?
Yeah.
Because just having the knowledge sometimes does not translate into good decision making, right? And in fact, I have worked with athletes who have self coached themselves for years,
Mm-hmm.
right, and have done that effectively. And yet at some point they come and they're not really feeling like, they're not progressing or anything like that. They are continuing to progress, but I think they start feeling burdened mentally in terms of how much mental expenditure they are having to do, to
Yeah.
the point where it's not it's not fun anymore, it's not recreational anymore. And it's just like you need a partner who's going through the journey along with you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes even if you have a running partner, it's nice to run with somebody in the group, right? You have the physical company, but you want somebody who can accompany you mentally through the journey,
Yeah.
right? And I think that is, I think, the most significant aspect of probably coaching somebody. And that's what I have always felt, even to this date, is what has been the biggest vacuum in my entire journey, right?
Yeah.
I think the one question which I ask myself the most is this a time to get a coach, right? Because I'm going through, because that takes up the maximum amount of time in my own planning and decision making, this back and forth of whether I'm doing too much or whether I'm doing okay, or whether I'm being too ambitious, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you also feel a burnout, right? Because and I think that burnout comes less from the physical effort, but more from this this whole thing of keeping to push yourself physically, at the same time take so much decisions. And the fact that I'm a coach right now
Yeah.
makes it all the more complex, because you're taking decisions around the same area
Yeah.
for a lot of other people, so you're already fatigued,
Mm.
right? But the only reason why I probably have not got much of a coach is because when you get a coach, you probably also need to develop a level of trust and a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and also abide to the plan to some extent, right? At this point of time, since I have been exploring, I'm still on a learning curve when it comes to the sport, as a subject and as a science, right? So even though I read things in the book, I am inherently somebody who doesn't trust things very easily. So
Right.
even if the greatest expert tells me something, I have to go out there and try it out. So
Yeah.
I'm still in that phase where I'm a guinea pig myself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So before incorporating something into my coaching philosophy, I just want to try that out. And that kind of becomes difficult when you are working with a coach, because the coach will probably not be able to accommodate all of that, like
Right.
you trying to progress in the sport and experiment and things like that. So
Yeah.
so far I feel like I've had fun doing that. So I'm just waiting for the point where I can say, you know what, I've learned enough. I think I'm fairly satisfied with all this experimenting, and I now want to focus as an athlete and just keep progressing with somebody who will help me, handhold me through this journey.
Right. Oh, this great point of view. I think that looking at a coach perspective, uh, looking at the athletes from the coach's perspective also gives you a different perspective of your own training, right? You get the chance to put that coach's hat on when and look at your own training from a bird's eye view and say, yeah, am I doing it right? um, uh, Ask, would I do that if I were if this was someone I am coaching, right? So
Yeah,
that's a great point
because
you said. Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
also come across coaching relationships can be of varying kinds, right?
Mm.
Come across relationships where somebody is performing at a professional level and doesn't follow what the coach says at all,
Hmm.
right? To the extent that somebody asked him, if you don't follow, and he's saying it very openly that I mostly don't follow what my coach says. He says, like, if you don't follow what your coach says, why do you have him? Why are you working with him? He says, because when things go really bad, I go to him. that's the time when I really feel like I got the support that I needed. So although I am doing a lot of stuff, I am paying, we are discussing things, but eventually I go my own way, and my coach ratifies that, okay, it's fine, and that's also a great idea, you can go ahead with it. So that process keeps happening. But sometimes when things are really bad, either physically or because of the let's say the stress from a race or something is not going right, he says that time you realize that coach is such a lifesaver.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've come across these interesting experiences. So the relationships can be of varying kinds, really.
Awesome. Awesome. So this talking of progression and uh, through the experiences and experimentation you had, right? So from a first marathon of 5 hours 20 minutes to now, you have progressed a lot. Your first world marathon was in 2000. First world major, so to speak, was in 2018, right? The Berlin Marathon.
Yeah,
How was that experience?
correct. Yeah, I mean, I was very excited about it, and I think that race was really a turning point for me because, of course, you are at the start line with some of the greatest runners in the world. Kipchoge
Yeah.
was there, right?
Oh.
He broke the world record. So when I crossed the finish line, there was somebody standing there with a board saying the world record is broken.
Wow.
So it's a once in a lifetime experience being on the same course and finishing, at the same finish line where the world record has been broken. And that's the beauty of running. Like,
Yeah.
very few sport will allow you to do that, right? Even cycling won't allow you to do that,
No. Yeah.
right? You can't be on the same course with the elites. But yeah, that was fascinating to know that, I can see the announcements being made and they're just a few hundred meters away from you. So that was one part. And also the fact that this was my first international marathon and a world major marathon. It's a completely different stature, both in terms of the prestige it has, the its history it has, and also the amount of participation which is there, right? These are like huge. I mean, the thing which strikes you the most is the number of people out there, right? It's just like a sea of people. I mean, you don't see that so much in India. It's fairly limited number, especially when it comes to the full marathon. And also triathlons are also fairly limited. So even though I had run international triathlons, but the triathlons are still limited participation. But a city marathon in Europe or in America, or probably I've not raced in other continents, but I'm sure in the other continents, they're just massive, right? So you are, of course, looking at visuals from those races and you're really picked up about it. And I think that race was the first time I trained really seriously for a race, because before that I was always, I was doing cycling races and I was doing triathlons and all of that, so my attention was of course divided. But I think this is the time when I was like on like a full focused attention. So not that I stopped cycling, I can never do that. I mean, I have to live with that. I just love cycling way too much to ever give it up. But I at least stopped, probably try, I could say that, cycling was a little bit on a maintenance mode. And for the first time, I was not trying to like sort of, try to improve both my cycling performance level for bike races and running races simultaneously. And yeah, the result was just amazing because I think I made a big jump. I was stuck at I was making very marginal improvements before that, and I suddenly made a huge jump and I finished under 3 hours. And so, as I said, but that was never the motivation for me to finish under 3 hours. It was just coincidental that I finished under 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And also what happened, I realized that evening that somebody told me that over dinner that are you going to run Boston now that you finished under this time? I said, but yeah, but Boston is the time cutoff is gone. They said no, they have opened the slot again for the to fit in the Berlin Marathon finishers, and that was something I was not aware at all. And I so I was not looking at qualifying for Boston or anything, but they had just one day time window, right? And I remember clearly how I after hearing that, the next day I was on in a metro train in Berlin and in subway, and I took the decision to participate in Boston while during that subway ride. Got off the subway, I had still not left the station, opened the registration page on my mobile because the internet connection was still flowing in after I got out of the subway and signed up. So, I mean, I never thought I would qualify for Boston, let alone qualifying, that I would register for Boston until that point. And that decision happening over a train ride and finally registering remotely on a is something which is like out of the world for me, right? So that was a big turning point in that sense. Like I did not know that I was going to do well in that race, and I was fairly surprised that I did that well. And then I did not know that I would qualify for Boston, which is in the running community, in the world of running, a significant milestone, right? And that happened overnight. So that's what I remember. I mean, these are the special things about Berlin Marathon.
Awesome. So, first sub 3 hour marathon, even though you did not kind of think about it specifically, what was the your best marathon time before that?
I think it was 3:15, right? And I think I finished I finished fairly fresh in Berlin, right? The reason why I finished in that time is because I joined a pacing bus. So the pacing buses are always at whole numbers, right? So they're either 3 hours and 3 hours 15 minutes and things like that. And I clearly knew I can do better than 3 hours, so I stuck with that bus. So in fact, I left the bus after a certain point of time because I was feeling really fresh. And I remember I have never felt that way at 30th kilometer. So it was a 30th or 32nd kilometer. I decided to actually push the pace, and I pushed way too hard. So a couple of kilometers later, I was started feeling those 2 kilometers. So I had to slow down again, but I still finished much better than what was the projected time at 30 kilometers. And if I had not pushed that hard, I think I would have done even better. But that's what I liked about that race, is that I finished. I was thinking that I could finish, maybe like 3 hours, 5 minutes or something like that. That's highly possible that I will start fading towards the end, which is what will generally happen to me during races. But this was the first time I ran consistently. And in fact, I ran faster in the, the later part of the race. So that was a significant aspect. Yeah. So, and that happening on my first world majors was just like the icing on the cake.
Awesome.
Really.
So what do you think went right in terms of training and preparation that you felt so fresh?
I think the stakes were high for me because, it was like a big race. So I think I was a lot more serious about this race and a lot more focused about this race. And so other times, I have never been, although I love the sport, and I think I take the sport fairly seriously, but not to the extent which I took it, during Berlin, because I was always in that mode of exploring and having fun, right? I was still having fun, but this time I was like, I'm going to set myself up like a serious goal, and my goal was to I need to finish strong as I finish the race, no more dragging your feet towards the finish line, and which was the primary objective.
Awesome.
So, and then I think that was a turning point, because that's when I realized I got the first taste of what it can, a very well structured training program and done consistently, the things that you can do to your running is just amazing. And that's why the progress I saw after Berlin was unlike anything which I had in the past. Of course, it's all the more challenging, after you finish under 3 hours, any progress that you make is significantly more difficult. So considering that, I was really happy with, the chain of progression that it started off.
Yeah. So it is a key race for you in so many ways. So sub 3, and that even though you did your personal best, you also felt very fresh at the end, and you realized that okay, this is what real good structured plan that and sticking to it can do. And I think that so 2019 was another string of personal bests and podiums. You did what Jan 2019 you did Mumbai at 2 hours 52 minutes. Another nearly 8 minutes, 7 minutes something cutting off from.
Yes.
And was this your first marathon podium as well?
Correct. Yes, that's true. Although I didn't know that something like that had happened even after I crossed the finish line. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I had never in my dreams thought that I will finish in the podium of a marathon. I mean, I had specifically targeted marathons in podiums in bike races, 10Ks, and things like that. But full marathon, I was like, this is probably not going to ever happen, right? I mean, I never even thought about it, right?
Okay.
But I remember when I finished Mumbai Marathon, I was walking back. Some of the people who were walking with me were like, you finished on the podium. I'm like, you must be kidding me. But it so turned out that I finished on the age group podium, right? And it's just amazing. Like I've had an amazing race, right? I clocked the exact time that I wanted to, so I was more than happy. I mean, that itself is like a big win for me. But to know after you finish the race that you've also been on the podium of a race which is probably I hold in high regard, right?
Yeah.
I just love that race. It's a race which I've done every single year of my since I started running, right?
Wow.
And when I started running that race, I was at the back of the pack,
Yeah.
and to know that finish on the podium of that very race is just an amazing feeling.
To what a progression. That is some journey, I must say. So, what did you finish in the age group?
Oh yeah, that I don't. I think second. I think finished
Okay.
second in the age group.
Right.
Yeah.
So clearly, you don't. Although you were happy, you don't really give that much importance to that aspect. But
Yeah, it's also difficult to figure in a marathon, because especially Mumbai Marathon, because it ends with a half marathon merging through. So you really don't know who's where and what, and you have no inkling. But of course, when I went to the start line 2020, and I kind of knew that there were only three people ahead of me all through the race, because
mm.
it got fairly low. It has become a lonelier experience with every passing year. So you become more and more aware of how many people are ahead of you, right?
Okay.
And have the knowledge that okay, I hit the podium last year, so you kind of are more aware of who's there in front of you. But before that, when you're not expecting, you really are not counting, because you're like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I think even overall I finished in the top 10, so there were just a handful of runners ahead of me.
Right.
So yeah, you become more conscious after that, I guess.
It's lonelier at the top. So you said. Nice. So, 2019 was Mumbai was not the end of the story. You did Boston in April and
Yes.
another PB there. How was how was it? How was the
Yes.
experience there?
Yeah, I mean, oh, that is completely, that's out of the world kind of experience. But I mean, I think I was able to perform well in Mumbai also primarily because I knew I had Boston in April. The moment I had signed up for April after Berlin, I was like on fire, right?
Right.
Because this is what you consider as the World Cup of amateur runners,
Right.
Boston, and you can't take it lightly. So, and I had no idea what the experience is going to be like. You're just going by the fact that it's a really old race. It was a 123rd race, edition. It's the oldest marathon, number one. It's something you have to qualify for. You earn your spot, so it's prestigious, right? But I had no idea what the experience of running is like. I heard about it, but until I went for the race, I had no idea. But the fact that I was able to cut down 7 minutes, Mumbai was kind of like a tune-up race to it, right?
Mhm.
And then I continued to see that progression, right? And as per my calculation, I should have cut down another 7 minutes in those 3 months in between, right? And I'll tell you, I was, because I've been doing this for a while, and I was able to hit all the targets, precisely in every race. So I was very confident, even that I should be able to do it. Although, it does strike you that, how are you going to cut down 7 minutes in, is it really possible? Or you do get that self doubt sometimes that, but then you look back at your training and you realize that, yeah, but your training is telling you that you are at that level,
Yeah.
right? So that's what I think another big factor of training consistently is that the training data itself will tell you that you are not just seeing dreams, that, you have solid data to sort of back you up. But even when I got onto the bus, the thing with Boston is you have to travel from the finish line in the morning, keep your stuff, and then travel all the way 42 kilometers to the start line. So we all travel in buses, right?
Wow.
So 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 all the runners get together in buses. So all the people I'm surrounded with in the bus are all accomplished runners. They're all sub 3 runners, and some of them have done Boston multiple times. So we are all discussing, where we are from and our own running journeys and what we are trying to, what we are aiming for. So almost everyone who was in my vicinity, asked me what I was aiming for, and I said 245, and they were like, "Wow, that's like a, challenging target. So what is your previous best?" I said 252. I said, "Wow, that's a big jump. And when was this?" I said 3 months back, and everyone had this look of disbelief, right? And I think when I saw that again, you get that doubt, like,
Yeah.
it's, am I doing something crazy? So
Yeah.
by the time I reached the finish line, my confidence is a little lower than what I, went in. But then once you start running, right, then you realize the magic of Boston. You
Yeah.
have no time to think and doubt yourself. It's such an atmosphere. It's actually a dangerous atmosphere if you're not well prepared,
Right.
because the crowd will goad you, will push you, right? There's not a moment where there is not like screeching, shouting noise through your ears. It's almost entirely like it's a 42-kilometer long stadium.
Right.
And it's almost like as if you are, some sort of a star out there, like,
Wow.
but that's a treatment which everyone gets, right? And that's what strikes me so much. I mean, I've done Berlin and I've done a lot of other races, but what you have in Boston is just out of the world. It's a very challenging course. It's not an easy course.
Mhm.
So definitely you don't go there because you're assured of a PB, right? So I had to train like, I generally never trained specifically for a course, but for Boston, I had to alter my training a little bit for the course, because there's a lot of elevation gain at certain point, and it's a net downhill. So you have to train for that specifically.
Mhm.
So I did all of that and I was fairly confident, but I never knew about the other aspects of the race, which is the crowd, right? In
Yeah.
fact, I'll tell you, there was one guy who was running alongside me all the time, and then some of his friends were there. They started shouting like, "Why are you going this slow? You've got to move faster." And he started moving really fast. And that's the dangerous, because I met him just, 500, 600 meters away. He had cramped out.
Oh.
Because when you're racing at because all moving very fast, right? And you're racing at your limits, you have to be. So I think in Boston, you need to know how to hold back because it's
Right.
just crazy atmosphere.
Yeah.
So that's my memory from Boston, and I'm actually very, very. It's very close to my heart, and that's why I signed up for it again for 2020. So I was looking forward to doing the 2020 race. So, and I'm still looking forward to doing the 2021 whenever it happens.
Yeah.
And it's always be a special place for me.
Oh man, that 42-kilometer stadium. That is a great comparison. Yeah. Awesome. So and still
Yeah.
yeah, still that 2019 did not end there. You went to New York and cut down further 4 minutes from your time. How was that
Yeah. Right. And so New York is actually more complex, or rather, it is a tougher course than Boston. Okay, because
Okay.
there are multiple bridges that you go through, and also New York I had to take a loo break, so I lost some time there. And I think pacing was also not as great as I had in Boston. So I still feel like Boston was the last, even though I have improved my time over I did two other races after Boston, and I scored a PB in both of them. But the experience was really special in Boston. But New York again it's something which is I always look forward to, because I've run, with the year I did Boston, I went for a run in the Central Park, right?
experience?
And it's an amazing place to run. So the race finishes around the Central Park area. So I was really looking forward to it, and the fact that, I mean, the spectacle, is just amazing for the race, because also uh, New York has the biggest number of participants as well as spectators. So 50,000 runners and a million spectators,
Wow.
right? It's just that, yeah, New York is, the biggest in terms of, the participative, let's say, strength. The thing is, Boston is a fairly narrower route, right?
Mhm.
So the effect is just huge,
Yeah.
right?
Amplified.
And it's like and it's more than amplified. It's like constantly there. It's like
Okay.
uniformly there. Whereas New York, you will have bits when you go over flyovers and stuff like that where there are no people. So
Right.
there are sections which have got huge crowds, and then the sections which are fairly silent. So it's a little different from Boston in that respect. But otherwise, it has the biggest crowd support. So it was huge event. So in fact, it's so huge that everybody doesn't start from the same place. They all actually the routes are slightly parallel to each other, and they merge after a certain point.
Oh,
So you
wow.
will suddenly start seeing new runners in different directions.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how huge the race is. So that's the hallmark of New York. And yeah, I was like really happy that I got to start there, and I think this time I was able to start fairly far in the front, right?
Yeah.
So I think I was in the first choral. So
Mhm.
that was the first time that because when I was in Boston, although I was happy to qualify, but suddenly what hit me was there so many runners ahead of me in that choral, because there's so many. I think there was one more choral ahead of me, and I
Yeah.
looked at every runner who passed by me joining that choral with envy.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish I was in that choral. Always want to start there. With New York, that was that was the progression that I made. That at the start line, I was right in the beginning, right in the front. So that was special. And of course, I mean, 241, I think, considering what had happened during the race, I think I finished off rather well. I think the last bit went significantly well. I finished strong and I finished fast. Although would have wanted to finish slightly faster,
Mhm.
but that's okay. As I said, I was never very so held. I always consider the the environmental factors that can play in, or sometimes even
Yeah.
things that happen. You have to take a loo break. You have got to take a loo break. You can't help it,
Mm.
so you can't beat yourself too much about it. But yeah, otherwise it was good fun.
Nice, nice. So in 2020, before the COVID played spoil sport for everyone in terms of events and stuff, you
Yeah,
did
yeah,
go. You did go and have a party at Mumbai, at least in terms of bettering your own time at New York and doing another PB. Although maybe missed
yeah,
the podium by a whisker or something.
yeah,
Yeah, how was that experience?
yeah. So the thing with Mumbai started off really badly, because 2 days before the race, during a training run, a vehicle veered into me, and I tried to jump across the curb, and I sprained my ankle.
Wow.
So honestly, the race starts, I think, at 5 a.m. I guess, I'm not sure. Yeah, but even 2 hours before the race, when I'm supposed to actually start getting ready, I'm actually sitting on the couch and wondering what to do. I wasn't certain that I'm going to show up at the start line, but I had shown it to a physio the day before, and she tested it out. And she said, after testing it out, she said, there are two things. Either you have a very high pain threshold, because of which you are not reacting, or I think you're good to go. I think you can survive the race.
Okay.
Because I told her, kind of foot mechanics I have, I'm a little 4-footed. So she said, yeah, that will take a little bit of pressure off your ankle. So, but Mumbai is always preparation for Boston, right? Slightly. So it's an important race for me, and I hold it in high regard. So it was a really tough decision for me. But the good thing which happened is, as I started off the race, I found a partner. Again, there's a runner called Nanjudappa here in Bangalore.
Hmm.
So I met him a lot. As we started running, he saw me, and then we both decided to run together. So I think that really helped me out, take my mind off the ankle, because it was just a nice partnership that we set off.
Right.
And I think we went on until the 36th kilometer we were together.
Hmm.
And I think at the hill, I decided to take it a little easy, because the hill, the ankle also starts playing a little bit.
Yeah.
So he pushed off, whereas I held back a little bit. But my plan was to sort of push towards the final kilometers, which is what I had been doing in my past few races.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, Mumbai Marathon was not that well organized that year, in the sense like the crowds for the half marathon were huge, and there was no space left for the full marathoners to pass through. So, I mean, if you're in mid of the pack, it's fine, but people in the front of the pack hit a really big crowd. And so what happened is, after the 36 kilometers, couldn't push the pace. So we were just confined to whatever space that we could find. In fact, at some point, I stopped running and I started
Wow.
walking, because I
Oh,
started wondering what to do.
wow.
Because I tried going from the left, going from the right, but on the left you have the people who are providing support, because Mumbai in the final few kilometers not only has volunteers, but it also has people like supporters, like, crowd, which kind of gives support. And there are like, cups going all over. And so I almost crashed into one of the volunteers. And at that point I was like, I don't know how I'm going to finish it. So it was that bad. But eventually I just mustered up all the decided to push out that frustration and keep moving and somehow just get through it. But what happened as a result is I couldn't push the pace. So I finished 30 seconds behind, Nanjudappa, who finished third. So
Ah.
I ended up finishing fourth, yeah, overall. So, but it was still a progression because I finished 10th overall, I think. The
Yeah.
year before I had moved to the fourth position and I finished just 30 seconds behind, which is as good. But the only problem was that the year before in my age group, even though I was 10th overall, I was second in the age group. This year, all the three people who finished in front of me were in the same age group.
Same age
So I
group.
finished.
Oh.
So I finished fourth overall. But I for me it was like that doesn't matter because I'm going to come back the next year.
Yeah,
I'm
definitely.
gonna, yeah.
Scores
But
to
yeah,
settle
let's
there.
see.
Scores to settle there.
Yeah,
Yeah. Nice. Man, this is such a great progression. Had you did 2 hours 38 minutes in Mumbai this year, and
yeah,
that's another 3 minutes off the NewYork, and it's another PB. And
yep,
from a guy from starting from 5 hours 20 minutes to even if we consider just the world marathons, world majors, starting at 2 hours 59 in 2018 at Berlin to now 2 hours 38 minutes is still a big progression. uh, Kudos to you, and I think I hope you keep that progression continuing, and maybe you know get yourself more and more PBs. Awesome. So coming to your one thing that struck me when you were talking about New York was that you said you had I mean, you had to use a loo during the run. Uh, One thing
yeah,
that I often hear with marathon runners is the GI issues, right? The gastro
right.
issues. How do you take care of nutrition for a distance like that during training and
Yeah,
racing?
yeah. I think I have a fairly simple, nutrition, let's say, program for myself.
Hmm.
I think it has, of course, changed over the years as I've realized the merits of certain things and how certain things are not really required. So when it comes to training, uh, I'm of course training most of the time in India. So the biggest thing is out here. There's a lot of fluid loss because it's fairly more humid here and hotter here.
Mm.
So that's one of the big factors. So definitely hydration is the most important thing, and electrolytes, especially if you're going for a long run, you lose a lot of fluid. So electrolyte and uh, water hydration are the critical aspects in training in India, right? Second thing is, if of course you're going through a challenging week and you have a long run at the end of a challenging week, again you will need additional energy sources. So I use energy gels for those days, primarily because it's easier to sort of carry it, and it gives you, and the thing is, in the race you're going to use the gel, so it makes sense to sort of use gels. So that is generally the nutrition for, let's say, running, long distance running. uh, and what I mean by long distance is the long days which you have generally for an amateur runner is generally on a weekend, right? Weekday runs, if it's a easy run, I'm generally fasted. I run fasted, and but always carrying water, and I'm drinking waters almost every 3 kilometers, irrespective of whether I feel thirsty or not. That I think is very critical, both so that you have a comfortable run, and at the same time so that you recover well, because you anyways putting yourself to stress on the other days, so your recovery is still going on, and fluid is very important to sort of circulate everything in your body. So you never want to be in a dehydrated state at any point. So
Mm.
whether you challenge yourself or not, you need to keep hydrating, especially considering where we are, right? So yeah, that's the key aspect when it comes to running. If it's a fairly challenging interval workout or a high intensity workout, which is also long volume, then in those cases also I would consume a banana before I leave. And very rarely, I think there'll be very few challenging weeks where I would need nutritional support during the intense runs as well. So that's when I will carry a gel.
Okay.
Depends on the kind of workout. Sometimes I've experimented around with really long cruise intervals where you're like reaching threshold paces every now and then, but at the same time, it's a long workout. Like it's about a 1.5 hour long workout. Then I would, just to be safe, I carry some, because you want good quality in the workout as well. You can't afford to sort of fade out in the intervals, or it's pointless. The objective of the workout is not met. So that's as far as running is concerned. I of course drink a cup of coffee every morning, irrespective of whether I'm training or not. I'm always having coffee in the morning. So I think that's there. So race nutrition depends on the country that you're running. Again, hydration will change a little bit based on the country that you're running in, right? If it's a colder climate, it's not environment which is not as humid, you're probably not going to need as much fluid consumption as in a humid country. So that varies, how much water I drink. Also, pre-run breakfast, couple of hours before the race. Generally, I stick to oats. Oats work very well for me. So oats and bananas, cut into the oats, prepare it overnight, and then have it in the morning. And it has worked well for me. So I've not experimented much around that. When it comes to biking is fairly forgiving in terms of how much you can consume before an intense workout as well, or even an easy long ride. So generally I would eat sufficiently well before the ride and depend less on food that I'm carrying when it comes to cycling. And so again, similar kind of food, a banana and coffee before leaving, or some oats if it's a very, very long ride, like 4 hours plus, I will have a bowl of oats. And also I carry oats with me while riding. So I make oat cakes, savory oat cakes, not the sweet kind. I kind of enjoy eating those, and I discovered that by accident. Actually, I once made some oats at home, savory oats, masala oats, and I think I didn't finish the whole bowl and kept it aside in the fridge. And then I realized that it actually forms like a very firm lump. Cake. So you can actually make cakes out of it. And since then, those are being made, and I make it overnight, keep it, and then I cut it into pieces and foil it up and keep it in the back pocket. That works really well for like the long distance rides. Nice. So that, and water and electrolyte, right? If I make a few stops, then I'll have a few drinks, like maybe coconut water. Sometimes if I get bored of drinking the electrolyte, I'll have Coke. If I'm making a stop, that is. So it depends on the ride as such. If I'm making stops, then I'm sometimes consuming a little more. But self-sufficiency, considering that, it's water, electrolyte, and oat cakes.
Nice. What is your race nutrition in terms of marathon looks like?
Race nutrition is gels, entirely gels along the way. Nothing, no deviation from that. I sort of depends on how I'm carrying the gels. Earlier I used to carry packets, so I had to consume the entire packet in one go. So that time the timing was different. But now I fill them up in small bottles with liquid.
Flask.
200 ml bottles. So I drink more frequently. I drink every 15 minutes now.
Okay.
So I take sips accordingly. So the idea is to finish about 500 ml of the gel and water mix over the 42 kilometers.
Okay. Awesome.
So I feel like the closer you can time your consumption, the more consistent your energy availability is, right? Okay. Rather than one go. So I've been experimenting around that. So, because everything changes based on your higher nutrition strategy. Because if I want to carry bottles with me, of course, the gearing would change. So I've had to change to a different kind of shorts, which allow me to carry 2 bottles with me. But that has worked very well in all the past races that I've done. Major races, I use that same strategy. So it seems to be working. Although it's not a traditional, suggested way of doing it, but something I have sort of improvised on.
That works.
And now I'm fairly confident. I'm fairly confident to advise the same to other athletes as well.
Yeah. Makes sense. So do you do any training off the bike and run, like weight training and stuff?
Not enough. Although I should be doing. And I think that's the realization that has come about in the past few months, is that, and that's what it's going to be going forward. That's going to be a major part of my training. And although all the athletes that I coach, I have always been very insistent on doing the conditioning work outside training, because I think what has happened in the past is, as far as I'm concerned, I've been able to progress without focusing so much on strength and conditioning. And I've seen other athletes not focusing so much and still perform well. So you tend to think that, you don't need to do it because you're getting away with it. Why change something which is not broken, right?
Yeah.
But, as I said, it's all, part of the learning curve, right? And as I read more and I learn more, I figured that I'm probably missing out on some gains which I could have gone by focusing on strength training, right? I could have made the progression faster. I could have probably made my training much more comfortable, much more stronger, recovered better, right? I'm probably suffering a lot more challenging, feeling way too challenged or not recovering well enough during training, right? As much as I would like to. So as I get more, as I look forward to more performance gains in the future, I have to literally look at, I have to wrench things out, because it's going to get all that much more challenging to make progress, going forward. So I have to look at all different pockets, right? So the thing is, I'm in a mindset of, which is very easy to sort of situation in where you can easily become very complacent, right? Because I have been able to progress with whatever I was doing, so I don't need to change it. But I think that's where a coach is, really helpful, because he will remind you that, you need to follow the process, right? Although I insist on the athletes following the process and it's very much part of their plan, I think, have been ignoring it simply because there is nobody to sort of, to sort of factor in that accountability, right? That you're not following the process yourself.
Yeah.
You're not practicing what you preach.
Yeah.
Right. So I think but that has changed, because I am taking it fairly more seriously, and I've started working on conditioning and started working on skills. So because my form is fairly good, I have sort of, I feel like, I don't need to look at that. But I think as I am going to start looking at, digging out more areas of improvement, this will be one major bucket where I think if I improve my form a little further, even though it's decent form, but the thing is, slight change in form has such a magnified effect.
Okay.
And that is why in running, especially, skill is so important, right? Your movement skill. You make a little improvement in your movement.
Yeah.
It's, each step at a time, right? It's those many steps, just imagine how many steps you're taking in 42K.
Yeah.
So as I've read many books of experts in running, unfortunately, most people will not lay so much stress on strength and conditioning. It's all about intensity and programming and periodization, right? It's now that I've done with all those bigger experts and I'm now reading books by lesser known people, I have been exposed to thoughts and concepts which are now sort of, striking me that, even if you don't have an issue, even because I have been injury free all through the journey of running, right? I've only had very few niggles, because of which probably, I've not given it that much importance, because, I'm not because generally people tend to focus on strength and conditioning when they tend to have a lot of physical aches and pains, that's what triggers them. But I've always insisted, all the athletes that I work with, that you need to stay conditioned, because most other athletes are starting off this activity, fairly late in their game, right? They have spent years where they're deconditioned, right? Then they're mostly sitting, right? So their whole body, and they're forced to sit through the day, right? So that sort of also has an effect. So I think by doing the strength and conditioning, you can make sure that, you sort of negate those effects, right? And that is one aspect that helps you stay injury free. But the other aspect is developing movement skills, right? Because running is a impact sport, right? And it's also a sport where you need explosive strength and reactive strength, like elastic energy that is involved, which is like running is a lot more power sport. It's about applying power, as fast as possible, right? Or doing work as fast as possible. Whereas in running, it's a lot more skill oriented, because there's so many degrees of freedom, right? You could be oscillating too much. There is forces from the vertical, horizontal, there is rotational force.
Right.
So there is just way too much degrees of freedom to stay in control. right, and to move in an efficient manner,
Mm.
right, there's a lot of work which can be done, which tends to be ignored by most runners.
Right.
And I definitely, going forward, I'm looking at, working on stability, working on conditioning, working on running form.
Yeah.
Although one of the recent Hyderabad runners, talk show, they had invited a running form expert, and I think he needed a few samples, and my sample was provided, and his comment was that I wouldn't touch his form. I might
Okay.
do more damage than good, right?
Okay.
So when that happened, again, you're thinking, oh, so I don't need to do that. But then again, I read a book. I read a book and I realize, oh, you know what? I've never focused on this aspect of it, because the sport becomes more mental as you progress,
Right.
right? It becomes less physical and more mental, in the sense that in the end your brain is telling your body how to move, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it is possible to program that to move better, to
Yeah.
move more efficiently, so that you expend lesser energy to get the same amount of performance. So that would be
Awesome.
that is my outlook towards, or how I treat things
Strength and
off the
conditioning.
run or off the bike.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, that is very important, I think, because even for me, whenever I try running, all my imbalances and the
Yeah,
lack of stability, everything comes to the fore. Because compared to cycling is fairly forgiving sport, I think, and when it comes to
yeah,
running, everything comes out, and now I've realized that I
yeah,
could benefit both from getting stronger on the bike, and maybe eventually maybe getting good at running as well. So I started that work.
yeah.
Great to hear that ratification from you as well. Awesome. So now to wrap things up, it's been a great session talking about your, not only your progression but various aspects of training, the way to look at various aspects of training and nutrition and conditioning, and all these things. What are the some of the tips that you would give to working athletes to keep progressing with the time constraints they have?
Right. I think I would reiterate what I just said in my last answer, is that you have to remember that although these are fairly simple activities, right? You can just
Mhm.
get out of the house and do it, as against, let's say, like playing tennis or doing boxing, right? Where you feel that you need to develop skill,
Mm.
you need to know, you spend so much time developing a skill before you can actually start playing matches in tennis, or, in any other sport, right? Even cricket for that matter,
Yeah.
right? Uh, and you need coordination and things like that. And somehow, most athletes in world of endurance don't go through that process, or don't understand the significance of skill.
Yeah.
So, and the thing is, when you lay a good foundation in terms of skills, in front of how well you move, right? It makes a marked difference. It has a magnifying effect, as I said,
Yeah.
because every single step in your training itself becomes much more better. So you are able to train at a higher level than what you are capable of without having worked on the skill. So you
Okay.
will be struggling a lot more, making
Mhm.
yourself a lot more susceptible to injuries, especially when it comes to running. It's almost like people just assume that you will be injured, and
Yeah.
it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
But I think you reduce the susceptibility of that by just focusing on skills, right? uh, and that's probably why so many professional level runners, they go through that entire process. It's just that they start young and they develop those skills when they're at the young age. So although when you read about these things, you don't see so much emphasis being given on skills, that's probably because at that level you've already well developed, and you're just focusing on volume.
Yeah.
We should not try and mimic that, and just try, because almost every athlete I meet is talking about weekly mileage, and the what is your race distance, and they're trying to increase their race distance. But if you work on the skill aspect of it, right, the longer the race you are, the more important the skill aspect becomes, because every little bit of efficiency that you gain through skills reflects on that. So you need to, as I said earlier, movement is guided by the brain, right? You need to build that relationship between mind and body, and not just think of running as, like how much oxygen you can consume and how fast your heart can beat and keep beating for certain amount of time,
Yeah.
because those are not the primary things, right? They are just, it's fairly easy to develop endurance compared to the musculoskeletal, robustness. So that's why people get injured, because their aerobic system actually becomes fairly well developed and it overpowers the ability of the musculoskeletal system. So that in the end makes you, I think you're running more challenging, right? Because you feel like you can go and run a lot more, run a lot faster, but your body doesn't support it, right? Although you feel like that the progression should happen, so you need to identify that, okay, this is probably a good time for me to focus on the very basics. So yeah, the thumb rule is, always keep working on your skills. No matter how good an athlete you are, how competent, how experienced you are, there is always scope for improvement in skills. So it's not like you only do something in the beginning. It is all the more important in the beginning, but its importance sort of stays through your entire journey as an athlete. So I feel, and I'm saying this because this has been a realization. This realization was always there. It has become stronger in the past few months. And that is why, I'm planning to actually do a camp where I actually want to, bring that learning onto. I've never done a camp before, but I feel so strongly about strength and conditioning right now and running skills right now that I want to be able to impart that. I just want to people to realize why they need to do it, because once you get the why through them, like, because sometimes when you just hear strength and conditioning, you have a lot of myths in your mind, like, why do I need strength? Right? It's like, I am not going to be lifting stuff, right? But you need to, if you can paint the picture for them, like, what is required as a runner, what are the physical qualities you need, what are the skills you need, and how this activity is doing it. It's not just prescribing something like, do this and you'll be good. If you can explain why, right? Because people read that otherwise in books and stuff, why I want to do this run, tempo run and speed run. But very rarely have I come across a book which explains this relationship very well, the importance of this. And in fact, very few books actually lay it down in a fashion which is easy for the runner to understand and implement. So I think for me, that's going to be the focus area, going forward, both as an athlete and as a coach.
Awesome. What you mentioned books that are easily laid out and stuff. Maybe make a recommendation for the listeners.
So there are. Again, running books can have a huge variety, right? There are some about the mental aspect of it. There's some things about basic training principles. So I think most of the training principle books are very well known. People have read, let's say, Jack Daniels, Pete Fitzinger, and Arthur Lydiard, and these are the the forefathers of running. When it comes to strength and conditioning, there is in endurance sports in general, like triathlon, there is Mark Jarvis that I have liked, Jay Deschary that I've liked, uh, Richard Blackgrove that I've liked, and I particularly liked his book. So these are some things which are there on the top of my mind. But over the years, of course, I've gone through many books, and wherever I've seen some interesting aspect, I've maintained my own manual which I've been building. So things which I have put to use and I've really liked, and how it has worked for me and athletes, I sort of have made it part of my own Bible.
Awesome.
So I really feel like there's no one single Bible available. So I'm just picking bits and pieces from whatever I'm finding interesting and whatever I feel is working well.
Okay, I think I'm also looking forward to that camp whenever you are bringing that out. Thanks a lot.
Sure, that would be amazing to have you.
Thanks a lot, Anubhav. This was a fantastic session. Thank you for taking the audience through the journey. Thank you for sharing your insights into training and racing and everything about your journey. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Venki. You've been an inspiration yourself. As we've tried to drop you and failed many times, and that has that has motivated us for many years. And what you're doing right now, again, is another source of great motivation, and you're bringing out so much insight. Really looking forward to your future episodes, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.